Hey all, it's Josh here. Welcome back to another Warhammer the Old World Battle Report. This one's going to be Game 3 of the Alberta Classic tournament that I attended. And my opponent here is going to be Garrett, and he's playing his Tomb Kings, as you guys can see. Once again, I'm on the left with the Lizardmen, and my opponent is on the right. Our scenario for this game is flank attack, and in case you guys didn't see any of the previous videos, there's some secondary missions for each of the scenarios that we played. So in this case, you pick a character and they get a free ruby ring, and you keep track of the wounds that they do with that ruby ring, and you get points based on those wounds. So depending on the toughness of the model you do the wounds to, you get more points, is essentially how that works. As far as spells and things go, there's nothing really that impactful this game. So the only things that I will highlight on Garrett's side are that he has Spiritual Vortex, and then he has the, I forget the name of the spell, but it gives him Ethereal and Fly 10, I believe. So those were the two most impactful spells of the entire game between him and me. So, and for anyone who watched any of the previous games, you'll notice that this table is actually the same table I played my first game on. So I was a little familiar with the terrain setup. And once again, not too happy with only the flat terrain, but I mean, it is what it is, right? That's what we had to play with. So you guys can see I deployed my Saurus kind of centrally and then did like a refused flank. And then my scouts I put as close as I could to him in his corner, and then my other skinks I just ran up behind the building there. So for my turn, I was just moving stuff up and doing some casting here. So this first round, nothing was in range to dispel on either side. So I basically got to cast with impunity. Oh, I should say too, my ruby ring obviously went on my character with on the Carnosaur, but he spent all game trying to get into combat and fighting in combat, so I didn't even get a chance to use it. So it never came into play. And then the same thing happened with Garrett. So the spell either didn't go off or I just ended up dispelling it every time. So he also did no wounds. Yeah, so for round one, for my turn, I end up doing about 8 or so wounds to the skeleton archers between like fireballs. And that's about it for damage. And going into his turn, he actually fails his leadership test to resurrect any. So that was good for me. He gets his ethereal fly spell off on his character. You guys can see in the top right there. And he actually charges my chameleon skinks, which I was fine with because, you know, that keeps that character from going into anything I have that's important. And so obviously the skinks won't be able to do anything to it, but you know, it's tying him up. So the big thing that Garrett was trying to do with his list here is he's trying to do a bunch of leadership debuffs and force like fear and panic checks. So his screaming skulls, you know, they'd fire their shots, and then anything within 2d6 inches of that would be -1 leadership. And then he did actually manage to get his spiritual vortex up as well. So that was another -1 leadership and couldn't use the general's inspiring presence. But to be honest, it never came into play the entire game, which is, I guess, pretty lucky for me. Especially when his first shot with his Screaming Skull Catapult actually got a direct hit on my Slan, but I saved it with the Slan's ward save, so I appreciated the Slan actually deciding he wanted to live this game. Yeah. Other than that, everything else just kind of like moved up and positioned, all of that good stuff. For the one combat, my chameleon skinks, they actually draw combat with his character because so his character has a great weapon and he rolled 2 1s to wound. So that was pretty funny. Going to round 2 and my turn. So my Carnosaur is at a point where he needs a 3-up on his Swift Stride dice to make it into those skeleton archers, and of course he rolls like a 2, so I fail the charge. Oh man. My rolling. So yeah, other than that, everything else just kind of moves around, and I'm looking to get into range to shoot things and do whatever I can with that, as well as with magic. So yeah, my shooting doesn't really do much, and my magic does absolutely nothing. I've moved at this point into range where I could be dispelled. So yeah, it's another pretty uneventful turn for me. Oh, I should say too, the chameleon skinks actually lose the combat this time around, and they just fall back in good order. No, I really expected my javelin skinks to do more than they did, just because I had such a good outcome with the jabber scythe. But unfortunately, they they only managed to do like 1 wound. If you like what you're watching and want to help support the channel, check out our shop at etsy.com/shop/battlebond miniatures, where we sell a variety of proxy models, terrain, and game accessories that can be used for an assortment of tabletop games. Use our discount code up on the screen for 10% off your next order, and don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and now back to the video. So going into Garrett's turn, so he manages to bring back 5 skeletons, which was basically all I killed last round, which is pretty unfortunate. And then he brings in one of his scorpions. And he actually, so he beat the chameleon skinks, which I think I mentioned, and he actually decides to charge my stegodon with that character. So he goes ahead and does that, and that was the and then he charges into my his snake riders charge into my skinks with javelins, and honestly, I was really expecting them to do something, just given how well they did against the jabber scythe, but unfortunately, I think they managed to do maybe 1 wound. So yeah, it's not a good outcome for them. Which, I don't know, a little rightfully deserved. I think I maybe should have kept them behind that house and maybe just poked out a couple of them and just kind of kited those guys a little bit more. It probably would have been a much more effective use of those skinks. So yeah, his shooting is minimal. So he actually manages to do a wound onto my Carnosaur, and also onto my Carnosaur from the bowman, which, I mean, that's kind of expected when, you know, it's 5s to hit no matter what, and my save's only a 4-up, 5-up. Then he's just doing some reserve moving, trying to get stuff set up so he can charge into my Saurus. And then as far as combats go, so his Scorpion, it beats all of my skinks that it charged, and ends up running them down. Oh no, sorry, So his Scorpion beats my Skinks that it charged, and then they actually just fall back in good order. And he follows up into them. And then my Skinks with Javelins that were charged by his Snake Riders, yeah, they just get completely obliterated and run down. So, yeah. Some poor planning on my part. And then, as far as his character into my Stegodon goes, it does 2 wounds to the Stegodon. But thanks to Stubborn and everything, I just give ground. And he follows up with it. So, he, like his character, has a great weapon. So, he's wounding the Stegodon on 3s, I believe. Going back into round 3 and my turn. So I actually managed to get the charge into his Scorpion with my Carnosaur, and we were joking about this because I was telling him how bad my rolls had been for my Carnosaur charges, and I was like, well, I need a 2 on the Swift Stride dice, and sure enough, I roll a 2. So it was a close one. Other than that, though, everything else kind of maneuvers around and all of that. I did actually dispel his ethereal, I believe, in this round. So his character that's engaged with my Stegodon is no longer ethereal, so I can actually hurt him. And then my shooting, once again, it doesn't do much. And then same with my magic, all my magic missiles and everything. Nothing goes off or it gets dispelled. All of that good stuff that my Slan likes to do. Going into combats, so this time his Scorpion wipes out my Skinks, which again I'm okay with because it means that his Scorpion isn't like monster slaying my Stegodons. And then my Stegodon my Stegodon crew actually kills his character, which was hilarious, and ends up overrunning into his archers. So that was awesome. Then his Scorpion loses to the Carnosaur and dies from combat res, and I roll high enough to overrun into his catapult. So things are looking pretty good for the Lizardmen at this point. I have a bunch of combats that are good for me. Moving on to Garrett's turn for round 3 here. He brings in his other Scorpion and he manages to get a bunch of buffs off and stuff with his magic. Yeah, my Slan has trouble dispelling. So kind of one mistake that he made here is that where he brought in his Scorpion, it stopped him from being able to charge my Carnosaur with his Temple Guard. Because obviously they couldn't wheel to get around it or anything. So that was good for me. And during this turn, I did also remind him, so he ended up putting up the Ethereal and Fly and Reserve move onto his character, his Hierophant there. So you'll see he moves up and like casts some spells and stuff and then moves back. But where he moved back, he did actually have her in range where if I won the combat with the Carnosaur, I would just overrun into her, so I let him move her out of the way because obviously, like, you don't want to be winning that way. So yeah, he's firing off his Screaming Skull catapults, and they're not really doing anything. They're doing like 1 wound. So I'm not too worried about it, and passing all my checks, even not being able to use my Slan's leadership and stuff, it's not making a difference. So that was nice. Going into combats, my Stegodon actually completely obliterates his unit of archers between impact hits and attacks and combat res. And he also passes his test to reform, so I get to reform to send him into something else, which was really good. And then obviously the Carnosaur absolutely obliterates the Screaming Skull catapult, and I overrun, and it turns out that I was able to just clip his character that was behind the Screaming Skull catapult as well. So that's another good combat for me. Oh, I did also forget to mention that Garrett actually tried to charge with his chariots and his horsemen into my Saurus, and he failed that charge. So that was pretty lucky too. I think he was out by like an inch and a half or something like that. Yeah, so going back to my turn for round 4, both my Stegodons were able to get in, and you guys can see we're discussing like how the horse archers are supposed to reform, because they're technically part of the same unit as the chariots, but obviously they can't rank up behind the chariots because there isn't room. So, you know, we called the TO over and he just laughed and was like, well, we'll just figure it out. And we kind of just put them in a line. But if anyone knows, please feel free to let me know in the comments how exactly that would work. My shooting actually from my Skinks manages to kill his other Scorpion that was over there, which was really nice. And then going into combats, man, my Stegodon that charged his Scorpion left the Scorpion on 1 wound. And of course the Scorpion managed to monster slay him. It was so disappointing. I think on average, like, the Stegodon should kill it every time with the charge, right? With impact hits and its own attacks and the crew attacks and everything. But it is what it is. And then, yeah, so my Stegodon was able to wipe out those horse archers and get to overrun into the chariots, which was good. And then obviously my Carnosaur was able to just absolutely crush his little wizard that was back there and run off the board. Going into Garrett's turn for this round, I think I did forget to mention, so this is round 4, and this is going to be the last round of the game because we're running out of time here. So this is actually going to be the last turn of the game. Garrett's deciding what to do, and he ends up deciding to charge his Scorpion, his Tomb Scorpion, and his Snake Riders into the Saurus to try and hopefully make them flee. Yeah, so he removed his template to recast it and also to be able to get a charge off. He gets the double charge into my Saurus, and he gets the charge into my Stegodon as well. Not much else to do as far as like shooting and stuff goes. The casket basically did nothing all game, which was pretty funny. Sucks for him, but funny on my end. Yeah, nothing for him to shoot at, so we just go into our combats because, again, we're trying to rack up points and everything like that. He manages to kill a few of my Saurus, and I managed to do a couple wounds back to him. And it ends up being that I fall back in good order, and that's it, because I shield wall. Or sorry, I would end up just giving ground because I shield wall. And then my Stegodon, funnily enough, actually wins the combat. And yeah, that's mostly due to, like, the chariots are actually pretty easy to wound, and he did get the charge off with his overrun, right? So yeah, that's how the game ends. Neither of us was able to get any extra points with our ruby rings, and we tally up the score, and it ends up being 657 for me and 370 for Garrett. So close game, but an actual victory for me. So the tournament, it started off not great for me, but it was nice to end on a high note. And as far as this game goes, this was probably my favorite game just because everything kind of performed how it was supposed to. And everything worked like it was supposed to, apart from the slan, of course. But honestly, it's not the slan's fault. It's literally just if anyone other than me was playing with it, I'm sure the slan would perform just fine. As far as the whole tournament experience goes, yeah, I had a lot of fun. It was really good to get all 3 games in. I got to play 2 armies that I've never played before. All my opponents were really great to play. I should say, too, Garrett was thankful to see my list because he had just played the list that I think won the tournament, which was also Tomb Kings, but had like 60 archers with a character in it with the like poison medallion. And he just set them up in, a row of 2, so like 30 long. And would just stand there and shoot. So yeah, he was thankful to not have to play a list like that. And as far as my tournament spot goes, I ended up placing 9th out of 14, which is not too bad. And like I said, it was nice to end on a win. Fun games, good venue. Honestly, the only thing that wasn't great was just the terrain. It was because it was that flat mousepad material. It was easy to forget that was there. It was there, and to forget what each thing was. So that's kind of my only criticism as far as that goes. Otherwise, everything else was absolutely awesome. This tournament got me pretty jazzed to play some more Lizardmen, so that was really good too. Going through my list and everything, I definitely have some changes that I would like to do for sure. I think specifically the skinks, the javelins were just so much better than the blowpipes, and it's specifically being able to stand and shoot regardless of where your opponent charges from, and then also being able to march and shoot. So I think actually having the 2 10-man scout units with javelins would have been way better. And like they probably actually would have survived a little bit better too, just because they could have potentially done some wounds for combat res when they were getting charged. So I think taking all those skinks too was not the best. I'm thinking next time I want to try maybe like a smaller unit of Saurus, and then I'd like to bring some Temple Guard and see how they perform, and then still have like the 2 small scouting units of skink skirmishers with javelins that I can use for like covering my lines or going up and trying to deal with war machines, that sort of thing. The slan, oh, the slan. Like I said, he should have performed much better than he did, and it was all honestly just due to my rolling. I think also trying out a different lore would probably help things out. So I'm thinking of maybe trying him with high magic next time and seeing how that plays out. Maybe swapping out some of his equipment as well. So yeah, some little tweaks there. As far as the Carnosaur goes, that thing was awesome. I absolutely loved that build, and I loved how well it did. And honestly, I wouldn't mind trying a list with 2 of them in it. The Stegodons were really fun, and I mean they basically did exactly what they were supposed to do every game, and I would love to get another Stegodon in there, so we'll see. Next time I'm thinking, yeah, an extra Stegodon. I'd love to have 3, or the double Carnosaur list. I don't know, there's a bunch of stuff to try still, and I appreciate that, so looking forward to that, definitely. If you like what you watched here, be sure to give us a like and subscribe. It really helps us out. And hopefully we'll see you next time for some more Old World battle reports. Thanks for watching.